On a chilly autumn evening, the streets of a bustling Midwestern city were alive with activity. The cool breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the golden glow of streetlights illuminated the roads. It was supposed to be just another, ordinary night for Lieutenant General Vanessa Hayes, one of the highest-ranking black women in the U.S. military. Earlier that evening, she had attended a charity gala where she was honored for her decades of service to the nation. Her achievements were celebrated by colleagues, friends, and even strangers who admired her dedication and leadership. But as Vanessa drove home in her sleek black sedan, little did she know that her life, and the lives of others, was about to change forever. Vanessa's car hummed softly as she navigated through the quiet suburban streets. She felt a sense of pride reflecting on the evening's events. Speeches had been given, awards handed out, and heartfelt conversations shared. Yet despite the accolades, Vanessa remained humble. She often reminded herself that her success wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who supported her along the way, especially her husband, Colonel Marcus Hayes, whose unwavering encouragement kept her grounded. As Vanessa approached an intersection, blue and red lights suddenly flashed behind her. Confused, she glanced at her rearview mirror and saw a police cruiser pulling her over. Slowing down, she signaled and pulled over to the side of the road, her heart beginning to race. Traffic stops weren't uncommon, but something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the late hour or the fact that she was alone on a dimly lit street. Whatever it was, Vanessa couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping into her chest. She rolled down her window and greeted the officer with a polite smile. "Good evening, officer," she said calmly. "Is there a problem?" The first officer, a tall man with a stern expression, leaned toward her window. His partner lingered near the patrol car watching silently. "Ma'am, do you know why I stopped you?" he asked, his tone clipped. Vanessa shook her head slightly. "No, sir, I don't believe so." "You have a broken tail light," he replied, shining his flashlight into the car. "License and registration, please." Nodding, Vanessa reached for her purse on the passenger seat. As she rummaged through it, searching for her wallet, the officer's voice grew sharper. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he barked. Startled, Vanessa froze. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, raising her hands. "I was just getting my license." The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her face, intently, his eyes narrowing. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Lieutenant General Vanessa Hayes," she answered confidently, meeting his gaze. "I'm with the U.S. Army." For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the officer let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Sure you are," he muttered under his breath. Turning to his partner, he added sarcastically, "Another one trying to play the important person card." Vanessa's stomach tightened. She wasn't sure what angered her more, the dismissive tone or the implication that she was lying. Still, she forced herself to remain calm. "Officer, I assure you I'm telling the truth," she said firmly. "If you'd like, I can provide other forms of identification." But the officers weren't interested in listening. One of them opened her car door and gestured for her to step outside. "Let's go," he ordered. "We'll sort this out." Reluctantly, Vanessa complied, stepping onto the pavement. The cold air bit at her skin as she stood there, arms crossed against the chill. The officers continued to question her, their voices growing louder and more aggressive with each passing minute. They accused her of being evasive, of refusing to cooperate, and of potentially impersonating an officer. No matter how many times Vanessa explained her position, they refused to believe her. Then came the moment that would haunt her for days to come. Without warning, one of the officers grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back. Before she could react, cold metal clicked around her wrists. Handcuffs. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what was happening. A 3-star general, a woman who had dedicated her life to serving her country, was now standing on the side of the road in handcuffs, treated like a criminal. Her mind raced as she tried to process the absurdity of the situation. How could this be happening? Why weren't they listening? And most importantly, how could she make them understand who she really was? That's when Vanessa remembered something crucial. Her car was equipped with a dash cam. The realization gave her a small measure of comfort. At least there would be proof of what had transpired, a record of the injustice unfolding before her eyes. With that thought in mind, she made a decision. Using her phone, which thankfully hadn't been confiscated, she dialed a familiar number. As the line connected, Vanessa took a deep breath and spoke. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I need your help." At the other end of the line, Colonel Marcus Hayes listened intently, his blood boiling, as he pieced together the details of his wife's ordeal. What neither Vanessa nor the officers knew at that moment was that this simple phone call would set off a chain reaction, one that would not only expose their misconduct, but also bring their careers crashing down. Colonel Marcus Hayes was sitting in his home office, the soft hum of a desk lamp casting a warm glow over stacks of papers and briefing documents spread across his workspace. It had been a long day, filled with meetings and strategy sessions at the Pentagon, and he was finally catching up on some much-needed paperwork. The house was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves outside the window as the wind picked up. Just as he reached for another file, his phone buzzed loudly on the desk. Glancing at the screen, he saw Vanessa's name flash across it. "Marcus," immediately answered, his voice calm but curious. "Hey love, everything okay?" There was a brief pause before Vanessa responded. Her tone was measured, but Marcus could hear the tension beneath her words. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I need your help." His heart skipped a beat. Vanessa wasn't the type to ask for help lightly. She was strong, independent, and always handled challenges with grace and resilience. Hearing her sound so vulnerable sent a jolt of concern through him. "What's going on?" he asked, sitting up straighter in his chair. Vanessa took a deep breath before explaining what had happened. She told him about the traffic stop, the broken taillight accusation, and how the officers had refused to believe she was who she claimed to be. By the time she described being handcuffed on the side of the road, Marcus's jaw was clenched so tightly it hurt. His mind raced as anger surged through him, not just because of what Vanessa was enduring, but because this kind of injustice was all too familiar. "Are you safe right now?" Marcus asked, his voice sharp with urgency. "Yes, I'm fine. For now," Vanessa replied. "But they're still here, and I don't know how this is going to end." Marcus exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay focused. He knew panicking wouldn't help. Instead, he needed to act quickly and decisively. "Okay, listen carefully," he said, his tone firm but reassuring. "Keep recording everything. Your dashcam should already be capturing it, but if you can, use your phone to document anything else. Don't say anything more than necessary to them, do you understand?" "Yes," Vanessa replied, her voice steadier now that Marcus was guiding her. "I'll do exactly that." "Good," Marcus said. "Now let me handle the rest. I'm going to make some calls." As soon as they hung up, Marcus sprang into action. Years of experience in high-pressure situations had taught him how to think clearly under stress, and tonight was no exception. He grabbed his phone and began dialing numbers, starting with his closest allies in Washington. These were people he trusted implicitly, senior officials within the Department of Defense, members of Congress, and influential figures who respected Vanessa's leadership and contributions to the military. The first call went to Senator James Caldwell, a longtime advocate for veterans' rights and someone who had worked closely with Vanessa on several initiatives. After exchanging pleasantries, Marcus got straight to the point. "Senator, we have a situation," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Vanessa has been detained by local police during a routine traffic stop. They've handcuffed her, a 3-star general, and are refusing to acknowledge her identity. This needs to be addressed immediately." Senator Caldwell listened intently, his expression growing darker with each detail. "This is unacceptable," he said firmly. "Send me whatever evidence you have and I'll start making noise. We won't let this slide." Next, Marcus contacted General Robert Thompson, a close friend and mentor who currently held a senior position at the Pentagon. Their conversation was brief but impactful. "Bob, I need your help," Marcus began, explaining the situation. "This isn't just about Vanessa. It's about sending a message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated." General Thompson didn't hesitate. "Consider it done," he replied. "I'll reach out to the Joint Chiefs and ensure everyone is aware of what's happening. If these officers thought they could bully a decorated general without consequences, they're about to learn otherwise." With those critical calls out of the way, Marcus turned his attention to the media. He knew that public pressure could be a powerful tool, especially in cases like this. Reaching out to journalists and civil rights activists he trusted, he shared the details of the incident while emphasizing the importance of discretion until Vanessa was safely released. "This story will go viral if we play our cards right," one journalist assured him. "But we need to make sure Vanessa is protected first." Finally, Marcus dialed the local police chief's number. When the chief answered, Marcus wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "Chief, my wife, a lieutenant general in the U.S. Army, is currently being detained by 2 of your officers," he said, his voice icy with controlled rage. "She was pulled over for a minor traffic violation and is now sitting on the side of the road in handcuffs. You need to intervene now before this escalates further." The chief stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Colonel Hayes, I assure you I'll look into this immediately," he promised. "Please give me a moment to get the full picture." By the time Marcus ended the call, nearly an hour had passed since Vanessa's initial arrest. During that time, he had mobilized a network of powerful individuals, ensuring that the wheels of justice were already turning. But even as he waited, anxiously for updates, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Vanessa sitting alone on the roadside, humiliated and treated like a criminal. The thought fueled his determination to see this through, not just for her sake but for the countless others who had faced similar injustices. When Vanessa finally called back, her voice carried a mix of relief and exhaustion. "They're letting me go," she said quietly. "But Marcus, this isn't over." "You're damn right it's not," Marcus replied, his tone resolute. "We're going to make sure of that." Though Vanessa was free to leave, the damage had been done. The officers may have released her physically, but the emotional toll of the ordeal lingered. For Marcus, however, the fight was only beginning. As he leaned back in his chair, staring at the pile of unfinished work on his desk, he allowed himself a small smile. The system may have failed Vanessa tonight, but together, they would ensure it didn't happen again. Not to her, and not to anyone else. And with that, Marcus Hayes prepared for the battle ahead, knowing that the power of truth combined with relentless advocacy could bring about real change. Within hours of Vanessa's release, the story began to spread like wildfire. Marcus wasted no time in sharing the footage from Vanessa's dashcam with trusted journalists and civil rights organizations. The video, raw and unedited, painted a vivid picture of what had transpired on that quiet suburban street. It showed Vanessa calmly explaining her identity, only to be met with skepticism and hostility from the officers. The moment she was handcuffed, a decorated 3-star general, was captured in stark detail, leaving viewers shocked and outraged. The first outlet to break the story was a national news network known for its investigative journalism. Their report aired during primetime, drawing millions of viewers. Anchors introduced the segment with somber expressions, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. "This is not just a story about a traffic stop gone wrong," one anchor said solemnly. "It's a glaring example of systemic bias and the challenges faced by Black Americans, even those in positions of authority." As the footage played, social media erupted. Hashtags like "Respect Our Generals," "Justice for Vanessa," and "End Racial Profiling" began trending worldwide, sparking heated discussions across platforms. People from all walks of life weighed in, sharing their thoughts and experiences. Civil rights activists praised Vanessa for her composure under such humiliating circumstances, while military veterans expressed outrage at how one of their own had been treated. Prominent figures in politics, entertainment, and sports joined the conversation, amplifying the call for accountability. Actor and activist Samuel Wright tweeted, "If this can happen to a 3-star general, imagine what happens to ordinary citizens every day. Enough is enough." His post received hundreds of thousands of likes and retweets, further fueling the movement. As the story gained momentum, protests erupted outside the police station where the officers involved were stationed. Crowds gathered, holding signs that read "Black Lives Matter" and "Honor Our Heroes." Some demonstrators chanted Vanessa's name, turning her into a symbol of resilience and justice. Among them were members of local advocacy groups who had long fought against police misconduct. They saw this incident as an opportunity to push for broader reforms, demanding transparency and accountability from law enforcement agencies nationwide. Inside the police department, tensions ran high. The officers involved in the traffic stop found themselves at the center of a media storm. Calls for their immediate dismissal poured in from every direction, from community leaders, politicians, and even within their own ranks. Internal Affairs launched an investigation, poring over records and interviewing witnesses to piece together exactly what had happened. What they uncovered painted a troubling picture. Both officers had histories of complaints filed against them, many involving allegations of racial profiling and excessive force. These details only added fuel to the fire, intensifying public anger. For Vanessa, the sudden spotlight was overwhelming. She had never sought fame or recognition beyond her military service, and now she found herself thrust into the national conversation about race and policing. Journalists camped outside her home, hoping for an interview. Messages flooded her inbox, ranging from words of support to heartfelt stories of similar encounters with law enforcement. While grateful for the outpouring of solidarity, Vanessa struggled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt a sense of vindication knowing that her experience had shed light on a pervasive issue. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. The memory of sitting in handcuffs replayed in her mind constantly. Marcus remained by her side throughout, offering unwavering support. He understood the weight of what Vanessa was carrying and worked tirelessly to shield her from unnecessary stress. Together, they fielded calls from lawmakers, journalists, and activists, carefully navigating the delicate balance between raising awareness and protecting Vanessa's privacy. They also made a conscious decision to channel the attention toward meaningful action rather than personal grievances. "This isn't about revenge," Marcus told Vanessa one evening as they sat together in their living room. "It's about creating change so no one else has to go through this." Their strategy paid off. Within days, prominent members of Congress announced plans to introduce legislation aimed at increasing accountability within law enforcement. The bill, tentatively titled the Accountability and Transparency in Policing Act, proposed measures such as mandatory body cameras, stricter disciplinary actions for misconduct, and independent oversight boards to investigate complaints. Senator Caldwell, who had been instrumental in rallying support, held a press conference alongside Vanessa and Marcus. Standing behind a podium adorned with the American flag, he addressed reporters and cameras. "What happened to General Hayes is unacceptable," he declared. "But it doesn't have to define us. Instead, let it inspire us to do better, to build a system that truly serves and protects everyone." The press conference drew widespread praise, with many hailing it as a turning point in the fight for police reform. For Vanessa, speaking publicly about her ordeal was difficult but necessary. As she stood beside Senator Caldwell, she spoke with quiet strength, her voice resonating with authenticity. "I didn't ask for this fight," she admitted. "But if my story can help prevent others from experiencing the same pain and humiliation, then I'll stand here and tell it 1,000 times over." Her words struck a chord with audiences around the world. Social media users shared clips of her speech, praising her courage and dignity. Comment sections overflowed with messages of admiration and gratitude. One user wrote, "General Hayes embodies grace under pressure. Her willingness to speak up gives hope to so many of us who feel powerless." Meanwhile, the fallout for the officers involved continued to escalate. Facing mounting evidence and public scrutiny, both were suspended without pay pending disciplinary Hearings. Their names became synonymous with systemic racism, and their faces appeared in countless articles and broadcasts. Anonymous threats poured in, forcing them to go into hiding. Their families bore the brunt of the backlash, enduring harassment and ostracism from neighbors and colleagues. While some defended the officers, arguing they were simply doing their jobs, the majority agreed that their actions were indefensible given the circumstances. As the weeks passed, the incident sparked a broader dialogue about implicit bias and the need for cultural sensitivity training within law enforcement. Community forums were held, bringing together police chiefs, activists, and citizens to discuss ways to bridge the gap between officers and the communities they served. Vanessa and Marcus attended several of these events, using their platform to advocate for systemic change. They emphasized the importance of mutual respect and understanding, urging both sides to listen and learn from each other. Though the journey was far from over, Vanessa began to see glimmers of hope. The outpouring of support reminded her that she wasn't alone in this fight. And as she reflected on the whirlwind of events, she realized something profound. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most meaningful victories. As the investigation into the traffic stop unfolded, the full extent of the officer's misconduct came to light. Internal affairs investigators worked tirelessly, combing through years of records and testimonies to piece together a clear picture of their behavior. What they uncovered was alarming: a pattern of complaints against the two officers, many involving allegations of racial profiling and excessive force. Victims had accused them of targeting people of color during routine stops, using aggressive tactics, and dismissing legitimate concerns when questioned about their conduct. While some complaints had been dismissed or swept under the rug, others lingered in bureaucratic limbo, never fully addressed. The damning evidence piled up. One case stood out: a young black man who had been pulled over for a minor infraction, but ended up hospitalized after an altercation with the same officers. His family had filed a formal complaint, but it was quietly shelved without any repercussions for the officers involved. Another incident involved a Latina mother whose car was searched without probable cause during a late-night stop. She had described feeling intimidated and humiliated, much like Vanessa had during her ordeal. These stories painted a troubling portrait of two individuals who seemed to operate above accountability, shielded by systemic failures within the department. When these details were leaked to the press, public outrage reached new heights. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters chanting slogans like "No justice, no peace," and holding signs that read, "Fire the officers." Local activists organized marches, demanding immediate action from city officials. Community leaders called emergency town hall meetings, inviting residents to share their own experiences with law enforcement. The mood was tense but united, as people from all walks of life came together to demand change. Inside the police department, the pressure mounted. The chief of police, already under fire for failing to address systemic issues within his ranks, faced calls for his resignation. City council members grilled him during heated sessions, accusing him of negligence and complicity. "How could this happen on your watch?" one council member demanded during a televised hearing. "Not only did these officers abuse their power, but you allowed them to do so repeatedly without consequence." Faced with mounting evidence and public scrutiny, the department had no choice but to act decisively. Both officers were suspended, without pay pending disciplinary hearings. Their badges and firearms were confiscated, and they were barred from entering police premises. For the first time in their careers, they found themselves stripped of the authority they once wielded, and the consequences didn't stop there. As news of their suspension spread, the officers became pariahs in their community. Anonymous threats poured in, forcing them to go into hiding. Neighbors who had once greeted them warmly now avoided eye contact, embarrassed to be associated with them. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to risk being dragged into the controversy. Even their families weren't spared. Spouses and children faced harassment at school and work, leaving them isolated and fearful. For the officers themselves, the fallout was devastating. Once proud of their roles as protectors of the community, they now lived in constant fear of retaliation. Their names appeared in headlines around the world, forever linked to accusations of racism and abuse of power. Job prospects vanished overnight, as no reputable organization would hire them after such a scandal. They struggled to find legal representation willing to take their case, and those who did charged exorbitant fees. Every attempt to defend themselves only dug them deeper into controversy, as their explanations fell flat against the weight of the evidence. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Marcus continued to push for accountability beyond just the officers involved. They understood that punishing two individuals wouldn't solve the larger problem. They needed systemic reform. Working closely with civil rights organizations, they drafted proposals aimed at addressing implicit bias and improving training standards for law enforcement. One initiative focused on implementing mandatory cultural sensitivity workshops for all officers, while another advocated for independent oversight boards to review complaints against police. Their efforts gained traction quickly. Lawmakers introduced bipartisan legislation inspired by Vanessa's experience, calling for sweeping changes to policing practices nationwide. Dubbed the Justice and Accountability Act, the bill included provisions for body cameras, stricter penalties for misconduct, and increased transparency in disciplinary proceedings. Public support for the legislation was overwhelming, with petitions garnering millions of signatures and rallies drawing record crowds. Vanessa became a vocal advocate for the bill, testifying before Congress alongside Marcus and other victims of police misconduct. Her testimony was powerful yet measured, drawing from her personal experience to highlight the need for reform. "This isn't about revenge," she said, addressing the packed chamber. "It's about ensuring that every citizen, regardless of race, gender, or background, is treated with dignity and respect. It's about rebuilding trust between communities and the officers sworn to protect them." Her words resonated deeply, earning standing ovations from lawmakers and spectators alike. Journalists praised her eloquence and poise, hailing her as a champion of justice. Social media lit up with praise, with users sharing clips of her speech and tagging their representatives, urging them to support the bill. Even critics of police reform found it hard to argue against her message, which emphasized collaboration rather than division. Back home, Vanessa and Marcus channeled their energy into creating lasting change. They established a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of police misconduct and providing scholarships for underrepresented youth pursuing careers in public service. The foundation quickly gained momentum, attracting donations from celebrities, corporations, and ordinary citizens eager to contribute to the cause. Its mission statement was simple yet profound: to honor those affected by injustice and empower future generations to lead with integrity and compassion. Despite the progress, Vanessa remained acutely aware of how far they still had to go. Police reform was a complex issue with no easy solutions, and resistance from entrenched interests remained strong. But she refused to let setbacks discourage her. Instead, she drew strength from the countless supporters who rallied behind her, reminding herself that real change took time. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Marcus joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "You've done something incredible," he said softly. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who feels invisible in this fight." Vanessa smiled faintly, sipping her tea. "We're not done yet," she replied. "But we're getting closer." And with that, they sat together in silence, finding solace in the knowledge that their efforts had sparked a movement, one that would continue to grow and inspire others long after the headlines faded. Months after the incident that had shaken Vanessa and Marcus to their core, the ripple effects of their fight for justice continued to spread far and wide. The story of Lieutenant General Vanessa Hayes, a decorated military leader handcuffed by police during a routine traffic stop, had become more than just a headline. It was now a symbol of resilience, courage, and the urgent need for systemic change. While the officers involved faced professional ruin and public disdain, Vanessa emerged stronger, using her platform not just to heal but to ignite meaningful reform. The Justice and Accountability Act, inspired by Vanessa's testimony before Congress, gained bipartisan support in ways few had anticipated. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle recognized the importance of addressing the deep-rooted issues within law enforcement. Hearings were held across the country, where victims of police misconduct shared their stories alongside experts advocating for reforms. These sessions painted a vivid picture of how bias, lack of accountability, and outdated practices had eroded trust between communities and law enforcement. Vanessa attended many of these hearings, sitting quietly in the audience, as others spoke, nodding in solidarity when voices cracked with emotion or anger. When the bill finally passed, it marked a historic moment. Among its provisions were mandatory body cameras for all officers, stricter penalties for misconduct, independent oversight boards to investigate complaints, and comprehensive training programs focused on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation tactics. The legislation also included funding for community outreach initiatives designed to rebuild relationships between police departments and the people they served. As President Emily Carter signed the bill into law during a ceremony at the White House, Vanessa stood beside her, a quiet yet powerful presence. Cameras flashed as the two women shook hands, their smiles conveying hope for a brighter future. But Vanessa knew the work wasn't over. Passing laws was only the first step. Implementing them effectively would require vigilance and commitment. She threw herself into advocacy efforts, traveling across the nation to speak at conferences, town halls, and universities. Her speeches were always heartfelt, drawing from her own experiences while emphasizing the humanity of everyone involved. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she often said. "But if we keep pushing forward, if we refuse to let fear divide us, we can build a system that truly serves and protects." Marcus, meanwhile, used his influence within the military to push for greater diversity and inclusion. He spearheaded initiatives aimed at recruiting and retaining underrepresented groups, ensuring that the armed forces reflected the rich tapestry of America. Together, he and Vanessa launched mentorship programs for young Black men and women interested in careers in public service. They believed that representation mattered, not just in numbers, but in leadership, and they were determined to create pathways for others to follow. Their foundation, aptly named Pathways to Justice, became a beacon of hope for countless individuals. It provided scholarships for students pursuing degrees in criminal justice, social work, and public policy. It also offered grants to grassroots organizations working to combat racial profiling and promote equity. One recipient, a young woman named Jasmine Rodriguez, wrote a heartfelt letter thanking Vanessa and Marcus for helping her achieve her dream of becoming a lawyer, specializing in civil rights cases. "Because of you," Jasmine wrote, "I know my voice matters." As word of the foundation's impact spread, so did its reach. Celebrities donated generously, corporations pledged matching funds, and ordinary citizens contributed what they could. Volunteers poured in, eager to help organize events, raise awareness, and amplify the message of justice and equality. The couple's living room became a hub of activity, filled with stacks of applications, thank you notes, and blueprints for upcoming projects. Despite the demands on their time, Vanessa and Marcus found joy in seeing their vision come to life. Vanessa's journey wasn't without challenges, though. There were moments when the weight of everything felt overwhelming. Late nights spent reviewing case files, early mornings preparing for interviews, and endless meetings left her physically and emotionally drained. Some days, memories of the traffic stop resurfaced unexpectedly, bringing back feelings of vulnerability and frustration. But whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of why she was doing this, not just for herself but for everyone who deserved a fair chance. One particularly poignant moment came during a national conference where Vanessa delivered the keynote address. Thousands of people filled the auditorium, hanging on her every word as she recounted her ordeal and the lessons she had learned along the way. When she reached the part about calling Marcus that fateful night, her voice softened, tinged with gratitude. "That phone call changed everything," she said. "It reminded me that no matter how dark things seem, there's always someone willing to stand by you. And together, we can face anything." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, prompting a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. People approached her afterward, tears streaming down their faces, thanking her for giving them hope. A young boy shyly handed her a drawing of a superhero wearing a military uniform. "This is you," he whispered. Vanessa knelt down to hug him, her heart swelling with pride. In quieter moments, Vanessa reflected on how far she had come since that chilly autumn evening. What had started as a harrowing experience had transformed into a catalyst for change. She thought about the officers whose careers had been destroyed, not out of malice but because their actions represented larger systemic failures. Though she harbored no ill will toward them, she understood that accountability was essential for progress. Forgiveness, she believed, didn't mean forgetting, it meant learning and growing. Years later, Vanessa and Marcus looked back on their journey. With a mix of pride and humility, their names had become synonymous with advocacy and reform, inspiring generations to continue the fight for justice. They remained steadfast in their belief that real change required patience, persistence, and partnership. And though they couldn't undo the past, they took solace in knowing they had helped pave the way for a better future. On a crisp spring morning, Vanessa stood on stage at another conference, addressing thousands of supporters. Behind her, a slideshow displayed images of protests, legislative victories, and smiling faces of scholarship recipients. As she gazed out at the sea of hopeful eyes, she felt a surge of gratitude for her husband, her allies, and the countless strangers who had joined her in this mission. Taking a deep breath, she delivered her closing remarks. "This wasn't the battle I chose," she said, her voice steady and strong. "But it's one I'll never forget, and one we'll win together. Because justice isn't just a destination, it's a journey. And as long as we walk this path side by side, we'll keep moving closer to the world we envision, a world where everyone is treated with dignity, respect, and fairness." The audience erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the hall. Vanessa smiled, feeling a profound sense of purpose. The road ahead might still be long, but she knew they were heading in the right direction, one step at a time.